Hi, this is Ed Fitzpatrick. If you enjoy local politics as much as I do, be sure to join our friends at Rhode Island PBS for the show A Lively Experiment. Hosted by Jim Hummel, the weekly series features journalists, pundits, and politicians debating the stories and issues that matter most to us Rhode Islanders. Tune in to A Lively Experiment and be part of the conversation. Fridays at 7 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS and wherever you get your podcasts. From the Boston Globe, this is Rhode Island Report. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. Welcome back to the podcast where we bring you big conversations from our very small state. Last week, Globe Rhode Island published an article that got a lot of attention. It centers around the rights of grandparents to visit with their grandchildren. Amanda Milkovits wrote the story, and she's here to tell us more about her reporting. Welcome, Amanda.
Oh, thank you for having me in, Eddie.
So on April 29th, the Globe ran a story that you wrote with the headline, "His wife died of cancer. Who gets to decide whether her parents can visit with his child?" Give us a quick explanation of who this story is about.
Oh, God, you say quick explanation. I mean, this is a pretty lengthy and complex and extremely complicated story. So to sum it up, we have a widowed father with a 3-year-old girl, and he is trying to prevent his late wife's parents from visiting with her. His reasons are he believes that they're both physicians, that they had a hand in contributing to his late wife's death by overprescribing medications to her and giving medical advice that misdiagnosed and covered up symptoms that she had cancer and it recurred and she had a massive brain tumor.
Yeah, you had a really gripping lead. No one knew Sharzan Nasso was dying until it was too late to save her life. So tell us about the health problems she faced and how she died.
Yeah, she's such a beautiful woman. She was known as Sherry to her friends and family. She grew up here in Rhode Island, very sheltered, only child of Iranian-born physicians. She had never strayed from what her parents had wanted for her life, and that's according to her best friend, her longtime friends. And she meets this cop one day named Scott Nasso, who was definitely not someone who her parents had in mind for her, and they just fell for each other. So they meet in 2016. In 2017, she's diagnosed with breast cancer, and she's really young. She's only in her early 30s, and she survives it. It's very difficult. They go on to get married through an egg donor and a surrogate. They have their very first child, whose name is Layla. And then she starts to get sick again.
And how did she end up dying?
So it was probably over several months that Sherry's personality was changing. She started to eventually complain that she had weakness in her right side, that she had trouble walking, that she couldn't pick up her daughter. And she's telling this to her husband, who wants her to seek care. She's telling this to her parents, who are saying that we think this is lymphedema or it's because we're weaning you off Prozac. But to outsiders, her own psychiatric nurse practitioner, then Sherry looked like she was having a stroke.
Yeah, there was one scene that really struck me where Nasso and his friends, Mike and Mary Jane Morgan, tricked Sherry into seeing a neurologist.
Oh, okay. So that was pretty much, according to Scott, the only way he was going to get Sherry to get help was to trick her, because all along she had been saying, I'm listening to my parents. They know what's best for me. So they trick Sherry into going out to dinner at the Morgan's home. They'd been good friends for a long time. And Dr. Thomas Morgan lives with them, and he's a very experienced neurologist with a practice in Warwick. And she walks in, she looked disheveled. She was dragging her leg. Her face was just kind of drooping. She had trouble speaking. She had trouble being coherent. Dr. Morgan came home, took one look at her in the kitchen. He's looking at her whole right side and seeing just complete weakness. There's a certain reflex, babies have it. Your toes will splay if you touch the base of your foot. And so do people who have some type of brain injury. She had that. And he also noticed, which really was alarming, that she kept nodding off. There were so many signs, not only that she probably had a recurrence of cancer, probably had a brain tumor, but that she had seriously dangerous brain swelling. and she could die at any moment. The brain tumor, as it was described to me, was massive, hard as a marble, and deep-rooted. So the surgeon went in and extracted it, but she never woke up again.
The story begins with a scene hours after Sherry died. Can you describe what happened?
Yeah, so the day that Sherry died, Scott comes home. There's a lot of mourners in the house, along with, of course, his in-laws and Layla's running around. And in front of other people, they hold Layla down and they administer prednisone. And she vomits and starts becoming hysterical, and Scott grabs her and takes her upstairs. He finds out, he's like, why are you giving her prednisone?
Yeah, why did they say they did that?
So the father, Dr. Garashi, told me, he says, well, she'd had the croup, and that's how I treat croup. I've done it hundreds of times. She's my granddaughter. I love her to death. And Scott said she was not sick, and he didn't want her to have it. So he got suspicious after the prednisone incident. And then he starts going through his house. Now, here's a guy, he's a longtime detective of the Middletown Police Department, but basically he investigates drug cases. So he's in his own house, and he's opening a locked cabinet, for example, in his kitchen. He's finding all these prescription bottles. He's finding stuff all over his house. And he starts really looking at what the heck's going on here. And then he goes to CVS, he goes to Walgreens, and he asks for prescription records. He eventually finds out that Dr. Garashi had prescribed about, I think it's 124 prescriptions for his daughter Sherry while she was an adult over the last 10 years, and about 36 for Layla by the time she was 2.5 years old.
So when did the dispute over whether the grandparents could visit Layla begin?
It started actually not long after Sherry died. So initially, they were seeing Layla, although not every single day the way they did when her mother was alive. They were seeing her, with Scott, her father, around, and with other people around, but not as often because they were doing other things. And then by, I would say in the middle of the summer, they filed a petition with family court because they had not seen her for 30 days.
And then what did Scott do?
Well, once somebody files a petition in family court, the parent is stuck. You have to respond to that. If you don't respond to it, it's a default. So he had to respond. He went into mediation. It's the first thing you do, and immediately told the mediator, no, I don't want them around, and I'll tell you why.
So all this raises some interesting legal questions. What rights do parents have, and what rights do grandparents have in situations like this?
Every state has some version, or almost every state has a version of a law that allows grandparents to petition a family court for some type of visitation. In Rhode Island, it used to be that if you hadn't seen your grandchild for 6 months and either your child had died or divorced, you could petition family court. Now it's down to 30 days. If you haven't seen your grandchild in 30 days, you can go to family court and say, I want you to order the parent of this child to allow me to see them. And usually what happens is it goes to mediation.
Have they tried mediation in this case?
Oh, yeah, failed immediately.
Huh.
Immediately, Scott said, I am not going to allow visits. I want a hearing. And so if you fail at mediation, you go before a family court judge. And that's where this case got interesting. So the original judge in this case, back in September, Judge Deborah DeSegna, decided without a hearing, as is required by state law, to allow the grandparents to have supervised visits with Layla. Scott said he agreed because his lawyer said, if you don't, the judge is going to do it anyways, and she'll make it worse for you if you object. He thought it was temporary. It was not temporary. It's been going on since September. According to him, according to Layla's therapist, according to her daycare administrators who I also spoke to, according to Scott's therapist, it's been really detrimental for Layla. I mean, she's just feeling the stress and acting out as a 3-year-old could.
We'll have more with Amanda after a quick break. When you want to go beyond the headlines, let me recommend Rhode Island PBS Weekly. Rhode Island PBS Weekly is an award-winning news magazine broadcast that gives you the full story, powered by investigative journalism and narrative storytelling. New episodes of Rhode Island PBS Weekly drop Sundays at 7:30 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS. Watch past episodes at ripbs.org/weekly. That's ripbs.org/weekly. So on January 1st of this year, Scott Nasso filed a complaint with the State Department of Health.
Yes.
What did he accuse his in-laws of?
He believes that there's medical negligence on their part. He also accuses them of Munchausen's by proxy.
What does that mean?
So Munchausen syndrome by proxy, it's also known as facetious disorder of another. It's defined as like a mental illness, and it's considered a form of child abuse. So it's the caretaker of a child. It's often a mother who either makes up fake symptoms or causes real symptoms to make it look like the child is sick. It's hard to know why they do it. Scott Nasso is saying this in his complaint to the Department of Health. He's not a practitioner.
And what do her parents say in response to the complaint filed with the Department of Health?
So their lawyer, Michael Ahn, would not allow them to answer any specific questions about the complaint at the time I spoke with them. They emphatically deny that they did anything wrong. Her mom says, I was closer to Sherry than anything. And she also says that she was closer to the Layla than even Scott was. She called Scott Nasso absent because he was working a lot. Sherry was a stay-at-home mom.
And why do they claim Scott is upset with them?
So they're very, very wealthy people. And they talked about how their finances had helped the couple when they first got married. For example, paying for Layla, essentially, Layla's birth. They said that they bought the land that Scott and Sherry built their home on in Portsmouth. They said that they believe that Scott is upset with them because they told him to move his things out of their $5 million vacation home up at Sebago Lake in Maine. I mean, Scott says that's completely absurd. This is not about money. This is about protecting Layla.
We're talking on Tuesday, April 29th, and I understand there was just a court hearing in family court this morning on this case. Give us an update.
So fast forward to today, Tuesday, April 29th. It lands before Chief Judge Michael Fort.
Family court, Chief Judge.
Family court, right. And it's before him because Scott is trying, they were asking for a venue change. They were asking for basically to move it out of Kent County, which is about an hour away from where he lives, but right near where the grandparents live, to Newport County. It's devolved into a massive fight. And so Judge Fort was going to determine today what's going to happen with this case, who's going to hear it. He did decide that he's going to keep it in Kent County. However, Judge DeSegna has suddenly decided to retire. And so he has no judge in Kent County. So a Judge Gill, who's in Newport County, is going to drive up to Kent County just to hear this case.
And what did the judge say about the story?
Oh, he was not thrilled. So first of all, he said he didn't read it. So the judge said he thought it was despicable that this ended up in the Globe. And of course, the lawyer, Michael Ahn, for the grandparents was also not happy either. They were not happy that Scott came to the Boston Globe or that pictures of Layla were shown in it.
Why was this an important story to tell? How would you address those who say, well, this is one family's dispute?
This is unusual. So first of all, grandparents' visitation cases are unusual anyway. And the General Assembly has taken up these cases before and tried to determine what's the right thing to do. So that's one thing. But this is involving two physicians who, obviously have an impact on public health. It's involving multiple agencies who the father is called in to do some type of investigation. And it involves a family court judge who appears to be issuing temporary orders that circumvent the law. And what is the impact when you do that? How is this affecting the public that you have a judge who apparently was not following the law? And this was not the only case that Judge DeSegna handled and issued temporary orders in without a hearing. So I found that pretty interesting. Before this story published, I'd been speaking to a lot of people, not just about this case, but how family court runs. And what I've heard consistently from people is that family court is broken. And the reason it's not public is because people are discouraged from coming to the media and talking about what happened. And I've heard that not only from the average person who's gone through for a variety of reasons, but lawyers themselves. And yes, the father did allow us to take pictures of Layla because that's who this case is about. It's about a 3-year-old. It's not about these 3 adults who are fighting over her.
How is Layla doing? She's 3.
So she's doing great. And Scott says she's doing great because she hadn't seen her grandparents since late January. The visits are supposed to resume, according to the court.
So what happens next? What will you be following?
I'm going to follow what happens with this story. I mean, it was right now we have not only the family court issue with the grandparents' visitation rights. We also have the investigation by the Board of Medical Licensure and Discipline. Blue Cross Blue Shield is apparently looking into insurance claims that were filed by Dr. Qureshi that were brought to their attention by Scott Nasso.
I've seen there's been a huge reaction to the story. Why do you think so many people are interested in it?
Boy, I think it's just visceral. If you have a child, the idea that you don't have the final say, that somebody else can tell you what to do with this child is really scary for a lot of parents. Some are seeing themselves in this. And the reaction I've gotten from people, not only before the story where they told me family court is broken, is I've heard from other people, not just in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and all over, saying, I've had major issues with family court. This really sums up my experience as well.
Mandy, thank you for taking the time to talk about this story.
Happy to do so, Eddie. Thank you.
Rhode Island Report is a production of the Boston Globe in collaboration with Rhode Island PBS. Today's episode was produced by Megan Hall. Audio mixing and mastering by Marissa Ewing of Hemlock Creek Productions. Our music is from APM. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. See you next week. Looking to binge watch all your favorite PBS shows? You need Rhode Island PBS Passport. Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, Rhode Island PBS Weekly, and many more. Watch them all, anytime, and from any streaming device. Learn more about this member benefit at ripbs.org/passport. That's ripbs.org/passport.